I tried to make this video earlier in the hospital, but I just broke down sobbing too much, and I was sniffling because, you know, when you sob, you sniffle, and I was afraid I would, you know, trigger everybody with that, because I know that a lot of targets are triggered by that. So I'm not gonna, I'm not even gonna post that. So I tried to make this video a few other times, and it's hard because the time I keep screwing up. I'm so tired. I just keep screwing up the timeline. You know, and because a lot of this took place like early in the morning, but when it was still like, we consider it night, right? Like, you know, between 12 and 3 a.m., which we consider to be nighttime, but it's actually morning the next day. Anyway, I just want to say this first. Anyone who says that there's nothing wrong with getting old and that it's beautiful, I'm going to guess has never sat by a loved one who is dying of old age. They must have never. They must have never sat with an elderly person that they actually loved who was losing their bowel and losing their bladder and couldn't walk anymore and could hardly speak anymore, couldn't control their body anymore, and who began to cry because they were losing control of their body and there was nothing they could do about it. What do you do? How do you comfort them? Because they know it's not going to get better, right? You know, whoever says that oh, aging is beautiful has never sat with an elderly person with Alzheimer's disease who has forgotten everybody they know and love, except occasionally the memories will come back. Occasionally they'll remember everything and everyone they forgot. And when that happens, they cry because they know that in a few minutes they're not going to remember anymore. I mean, does anyone like... The fact that there are people who say that oh, you know, nature is beautiful and let's get... No, let's not get back to nature. You know, it's almost a form of Stockholm syndrome. Like, you know how with Stockholm syndrome, victims tend to try to identify with their captor, with their victimizer. Why? Because that's how they survive, right? Because they have to appease them in order to survive. And in order to justify appeasing them, they have to try to make the captor seem like a good, decent person who is correct, right? Otherwise, they can't justify what they have to do in order to appease him, which they need to do in order to survive. So what happens? They do that to survive, and that's understandable. Okay, I fully understand that. The problem is when they don't understand what they're doing, because what happens is with Stockholm syndrome, you know, not only that, but at some point they might be able to get away. They might be able to escape, but they're not going to, because they're now appeasing their captor. They're now calling him good, and the people who are trying to save them, they're calling the bad guys, right? And I think that, you know, so what was initially you know, a survival strategy becomes counterproductive to survival. And I think the same thing happens with health issues, especially when it comes to really serious health issues. You know, before modern medicine, people just couldn't do anything about it. So they tried to make light of it. They tried to find something positive about death and dying and aging and all this shit, because that's what they had to do in order to psychologically survive, in order to cope, which I understand. The problem is, you know, well, what happens now when there might be, you know, relief, right? There might be some kind of cure for whatever ails us, and they're still... And now they're trying to stop the cure. Why? Because they're holding on to these ideas of beauty in suffering, of beauty in whatever is causing the suffering, right? The very thing that they developed, this, you know, this security blanket they developed in order to cope, they're now using to try to stop whatever, the very thing that created the need in them for that security blanket. Did I explain that properly? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so my mom's in the hospital. She's in the hospital, and I promise I'm gonna try to get through this without crying, because I don't want to sniffle and trigger everybody, right? Okay, so this happened Monday night, early Tuesday morning. That's when it happened. It was like, it started around 12 a.m. Monday night, which is actually Tuesday morning, but because it's still dark out, it's still night. We usually consider it night. I'm gonna try to explain this, and it's just I'm gonna screw up. Okay. So my mom, now until that point, my mom was mobile. Okay, like she didn't need a wheelchair. Like if she was outside, she would use a walker. But inside, she was mobile. She could walk back and forth. She could get to the bathroom on her own. The only thing is, at night she would need help because sometimes when she woke up, she would be confused and not quite know where she was, and you just disoriented. But that would pass quickly. But when that happened, if she got it before it passed, she could fall. So, this is why, I have to be a caregiver 24/7, because even though most of the time she's okay and she's not going to fall, that one time that she does fall and I'm not here is, that can't happen. And as for everything else, like the only thing she couldn't do on her own was bathe. But for the most part, she could do other things on her own. She just wouldn't. Like if I didn't make her eat, she wouldn't eat. So, but you all know the story to that. I'm not going to get into that again. Let's move on. So she had fallen asleep in her recliner, and I didn't go to sleep because I was afraid that if she got up and tried to go to the bathroom or go to her bed, she might fall, because this is the time when I actually need to be awake, to make sure that she's not going to fall. So, and it's why I don't get a lot of sleep, right? So she, it was like around 12 midnight, I'm guessing. It's not going to be the exact time. So it was around 12 midnight, and she started waking up, and she was upset. She was groaning a little bit, but it was a weird groan, like it was crackly, kind of. I don't know. It was weird, but she acts weird all the time. So I'm thinking, what is it? So I asked her, Mom, what's wrong? You right? What's wrong? And she said she wasn't quite answering, which she doesn't always. So then she said she has to go to the toilet, right? So to the bathroom. She tried to get up and she couldn't get up, which occasionally at night when she's really confused and she just wakes up, she can't get up. Or she can, but she's shaky and she might fall. So I helped her up, and I walked her to the bathroom, and this time it was difficult. She was really weak. She was and she was having trouble. And so I sat her down on the toilet, and like she plopped down because she couldn't stand anymore. It was hard. And at that point, she started to slur her words, and she was slurring she had slurred speech. She was drooling a little bit. Now, I've seen her drool before. I've seen, when she first wakes up, she's been kind of incoherent at times too. So this wasn't entirely new, but the extreme was new. It wasn't usually this bad before, and it didn't last long before. This time it was pretty bad, and it lasted. It didn't stop. So I looked at her again. I said, Mom, what's wrong? And this time she said, I don't know. And but the way she said it, like she was almost crying. She was scared. She said, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. And she was scared. And I was scared. And I said, so then I checked for, I knew she was slurring her speech, and so I checked, I asked her to hold up her hands because I wanted to see if they were even, if she could hold them up, or if one maybe was lower to the ground, or it fell down more. And one arm did seem to go down a bit more. She was having trouble with one, but not too much. Then I asked her to squeeze my fingers, and there didn't seem like too much of a difference. So I tried to talk to her, and she was coherent to a certain extent. I don't think she could understand everything, but she could understand a lot of things, and she could still respond at that point. I told her that I was concerned and that I'm gonna call an ambulance. But let me get, see, I'm screwing up again. I did call her doctor because they have an emergency, after hours clinic, and I called them and they called me right back, and I explained what was happening. And I said, it's at this time of the night she just gets up. She's been discombobulated before, but never this bad. Never like this, really. And they said, well, they didn't even suggest initially going to the ER. They suggested that after the fact, but they suggested making an appointment for a few days later. But they said they said they didn't have one for the next day, which was the next day, but it was that day, like, because that was, remember, it was like, it was Monday night, but it was still Tuesday morning. Like, it was like, I must have called around 12:30 at that point, a.m. 12:30 a.m. Tuesday morning, Monday night, whatever. So they didn't have any appointments for Tuesday, but they would for Wednesday, which is today. I made the appointment, and before I hung up, they said, but if it gets worse, go to the ER. Okay. So I went back to try to talk to her, and because sometimes it just takes a little time, right? And within a few minutes, she's fine. But this time, it's not clearing up. It wasn't clearing up, and it was frightening. And I told her I told her I'm going to call an ambulance, because here's the thing too, like, she was sitting on the toilet, and at that point I tried to get her up to stand up, and she couldn't stand up. And if she had a wheelchair, like, did I say before she didn't have a walker? Because she does have a walker. She doesn't have a wheelchair. She has a walker to use outside when we go out, but in the apartment, she doesn't even need that, or she didn't even need that before. She could walk back and forth. The only time I really had to be careful with her was at night, which is when she had a falling risk because she was disoriented. And occasionally during the day, if she wasn't feeling well, she could be disoriented too. But so I had no wheelchair. I couldn't just pick her up off the toilet and put her in a wheelchair. And I couldn't carry her back to her bed. I had to call the ambulance with her sitting on the toilet. And I hated to do that because it would have been embarrassing for her. And I asked them on the phone if they could send women, but they said, because of the issue, because of that. And they said, no, they could, the first people who get the call come, or something like that, or the closest people, I don't know, which was fine. The woman was nice. So when they came, it was like, it was 2 women and a man. And so they went in, and it took all of them to help her. Like, from what I remember, it's going so, like, it's replaying so quickly in my mind, and it's so foggy now. I don't know if it took all 3 of them, but it took both women to pick her up and to put her on the on the thing that they carried her out on, and it took help from the guy too. I couldn't have done that on my own. Okay, so I asked, I asked if I should ride with them, or should I go meet them there, and they said I should just go on my own and meet them there, because I don't think you can ride with them. Okay, so I called rideshare, because I don't have a car, and I was afraid that the perpetrators would prevent me from getting there. Like, they would stop me from being able to get there. But luckily that didn't happen. So I was able to get, a car within like 10 minutes or something. So I got to the hospital. So she's lying in bed, and she's agitated at that point. She's on and off groaning, and again, in that weird crackly voice, like she doesn't have enough air in her lungs. So we were talking, trying to anyway, and to a certain extent, she could respond, but she became less and less coherent as time went on. And, she was just saying, I want to go home, but slurring her speech. Like, she was saying it, but she was having difficulty saying it. And I was telling her we can go home, but after they check her out to make sure she's okay, right? She did start to push the doctors away. She started yelling at them, which is uncharacteristic of her. She doesn't yell at people who are being nice to her, right? The only time in the last few years, really, I've ever seen her get really angry and scream and shout and curse at people is the perpetrators, when they're pounding again and won't stop, right? They're pounding on the walls and they won't stop. Okay, then I've seen her scream and shout, but for anyone else, she does not. She's really kind. So this was uncharacteristic of her. She was upset and agitated. So they took her for the test. They gave her an Ativan, or if not an Ativan, a benzo or something to calm her down. Um, that's, yeah, it's, which did seem to calm her down. And at that point, though, she couldn't, she didn't seem to like she could say much. I don't know. She wasn't fully asleep, but she wasn't fully conscious. So the hospital was packed, and they didn't have any rooms open, so we had to wait in the ER till like from, what was it, like whatever time we got there, you know, AM, well, to like 4-ish PM, right, yesterday afternoon. And yeah, so it was like all night, right into, you know, the morning, the afternoon. So around like 4 or 5 yesterday, they finally got a room and they sent her up. You know, we went up, and what else? So I stayed there for, you know, maybe an hour or two, because they didn't know what was wrong with her, and they said they were going to be doing tests and they were going to monitor her. You know, that she had a cardiac issue, which is, you know, what they were also monitoring, but they didn't know what was causing the neurological problems, and they didn't know if they didn't know if it was related to the cardiac issues or not. But her heart is stable now, so that's good. But neurologically, she was just not okay. Okay, so I stayed with her for a little while, and that's how it was. Before I left, you know, I went over to her, and I touched her arm and I touched her hand, and let me get through this without crying. I said, "Mom, I love you. I'm going, and I will. I'll be back tomorrow morning." And she nodded, so she understood that to a certain extent. And I said, "I love you," and she mouthed the words back, "I love you." She couldn't say it. She couldn't speak, but she tried. But here's the thing. I'm sorry. Try not to cry, because if I cry, I'm going to sniffle, and if I sniffle, I'm going to trigger everyone, right? Okay. So at that point, to a certain extent, she could still respond. I'm going to edit that sniffle out, I think. Okay, so I went home, and that night, yesterday night, I called, and, you know, before I went to bed, and I asked them how she was, and they said, well, she's sleeping, you know. She's still sleeping. She's sleeping comfortably, and okay, fine. They did give her the anti-anxiety drug, so that would cause her to sleep, and it would also create more confusion, I think, you know. Okay, so I got there this morning at around like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and she was still sleeping. Still really out of it. Occasionally when one of the technicians and doctors came in to do something, she would groan and she would fight them a little bit. She didn't like it. But it was, again, weird. Like, she was conscious but unconscious. She's fighting them, but almost like in her sleep. I don't know. It's like she couldn't fully wake up. I tried talking to her. You know, I told her that I was here. I told her that I love her, and she kind of turned to me a little bit and tried to say something. She couldn't say anything. I don't know that she realized I was there. Her mental state continues to decline. Her ability to speak and to understand continues to decline, and that's what was so terrifying. Okay, so I spoke with the doctors, came in and talked to me. They said they were going to try to find out why this was happening. They're going to run all the tests they possibly can to find out what is causing this, because it happened so suddenly too, right? Because, I'm not going to say that she was perfectly fine before. She wasn't, but it was never this bad. It got this bad real quick. And, I wasn't aware that, dementia could escalate that quickly, right? Because slowly she has been declining. But this was a huge escalation. Like, this happened quickly. So, what else? All right. So they said, okay, you know what? They're just going to do the MRI. Because in the ER, they had said that, if since the CAT scan looked okay, they're not going to do an MRI. But today they did the MRI. And that was, yesterday, but the day they did the MRI. And when the doctor came back, he said it's bad. He said she had a stroke with a hemorrhagic stroke. So I'm, flipping out, panicking, I'm thinking, well, is she ever going to be okay again? Am I ever going to be able to talk to her again? Is she ever going to be able to talk to me again? They said they didn't know. They said that they didn't know the extent. They said that it could be less severe and she might recover to a certain extent, but they just don't know. So they said they want to do another scan. I don't know if it was a CT scan or whatever, to see, just to look further. And I said, well, why last night did they say that it wasn't a stroke? And the doctor said that maybe they couldn't tell on the scan last night, but they can tell now. So they did another scan. I don't know exactly, but anyway, the doctor came in, and the night shift doctor finally. I'm sorry for the sniffling. I'm not trying to trigger people. I'm sorry. The doctor came in, the night shift doctor, and she said, she said that they want to do more tests. They want to do more scans because they're not quite sure what the extent of the damage is. She said going into the future, looking into the future, they're going to keep her there for a few days. She might need to go to rehab. If she might be able to come home, if that's the case, I'm going to have to learn how to take care of her in that sense, because even though this has been a 24/7 job up to now, I said, well, if I wouldn't feed her, if I wouldn't get her food, she wouldn't eat. But I would have to sit there and watch her. She could still take the food and put it in her mouth, right? Now she can't. Right now she can't even swallow. That's why they said she was drooling, because she can't swallow. They said that's why she was drooling, because she can't swallow even. She couldn't even swallow medication. Up until now, she could get to the toilet on her own. Yes, I would have to help her at night. Yes, I would have to stay up all night to make sure she didn't get up at night and I say stay up all night, on and off. Of course, I've fallen asleep sometimes. But, I'd have to be there to make sure she wouldn't fall at night. But she could still move on her own. Now she can't. I've never, will she need a catheter? I've never done that. But they gave a little bit of hope, right? They gave a little bit of hope that she might regain some of her faculties. Like she might become, to a certain extent, cognizant again, where we can communicate. And I'm so hoping that's true. It's like running a marathon when you're a caregiver. It's like when you're a full-time 24/7 caregiver and you're the only one and there's no one else there to help. It's like running a marathon that you can't stop, and the terrain gets worse and worse as it goes on, right? And you can't stop. The only way you can stop is if a tragedy happens, and you don't want that. You don't want that. But you're exhausted. And these are the only two options. There's no other option. So right now the best option is that she will improve somewhat. I hope she does. I hope to the universe that she does, because I want to be able to talk to her again. Even if it means having to just be here 24/7 and never leave, and learn how to change a catheter, and I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to be like. But that's literally the best option. Everything else is horrible. I don't know what's going to happen. And then, this has been my job for so long, and it's not a paid job. I have nothing saved up, and right now I'm her caregiver in a senior building. Right, it's for senior citizens. I live here with her as her caregiver. I have no, when when I could, I was working for a rideshare. I was delivering food on foot. I was just walking around delivering food. But when her mental state started to decline a bit more, I stopped doing that quite as often because I needed to be here more for her. But even still, that was nothing like it is now. It was just so quick overnight. She was still somewhat functional then. She could still hold a conversation then. She could still walk to the toilet. She could still, everything that irritated me about her now I miss. Like, even even waking me up in the middle of the night, even getting up, when I wake up and seeing a trail of toilet paper, because she would you all know the story of the toilet paper if you've watched my videos. But she would just drop toilet paper everywhere. Like, you always know where she went because she would leave toilet paper everywhere. And I even now, last night I came home and and then this morning I woke up and I realized I walked to the bathroom and there was no toilet paper on the floor. For the first time, I wish there was. When I was waiting in the hospital, she was having a test, and I went to the waiting area, and there was a loud thump coming from somewhere, and instantly I panicked, and I because that's my instinct. If I hear a loud thump, it's like this primal protect the person that you care about instinct. I'm thinking, oh God, did she fall? And then immediately I remembered, no, she's in the hospital. We're in the hospital. They're taking care of her now. They're taking care of her. I just sit here now. This is on them now. And I felt so much guilt. When you're exhausted and you need a break and you can never get one, And then finally you get a little break, right? You get a little break, but it's because something horrible happened. And there's guilt. I'm not taking care of her tonight because she's in the hospital. Other people are taking care of her tonight because she's in the hospital. She's the only person in the world, I think, that I've ever truly unconditionally loved no matter what, and who's ever truly unconditionally loved me back. My dad might have. I don't know. He died when I was a baby. He died when I was a baby. Even the things that irritated me now, I kind of miss, like, even up until the very day this happened, like even up till that afternoon, I had gone. What did I do? If I had gone right next door, I had gone to, if I would go out up to the laundry room to do the laundry. Every time I would leave, she would say, "I love you, pray." And I would always say, "I love you back, but stop telling me to pray," because I'm losing all faith, right? I'm losing all faith. Now I miss hearing her say that. Now I walk out the door and there's nothing. Just silence. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to cry, but I knew I would. And I know I've sniffled so much, I hope that didn't trigger anyone. I'm just so fucking tired of life. And as always, I'm completely alone, except for the perpetrators. And I'm afraid that they're going to interfere again and try to do something. I don't know what, but something bad. I don't know. To make this even harder. Anyway, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know if she'll ever be able to come home. I hope she will. If she doesn't, I won't be staying here for very long. So that's what's happening. Bye.